The other thing I wanted to turn to after just talking about those three bishops was the role of the Council of Bishops within the United Methodist Church. Of course, the denomination was imagined very much in a similar way to the United States government, where you have a judiciary, an executive, and a legislative. But according to some authors, there's really been a takeover by the executive, that the Council of Bishops has stepped out of line. So there was this article written on August 29th by John Lomperis in Juicy Ecumenism. And did you see this one? The liberal bishops have redefined United Methodist polity.
I did see that one.
You saw that picture right on the front?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it has
King George?
Oh, I didn't know the king.
Well, is it George Washington being portrayed as a king?
I don't know the history of this painting. If he
Can
talked
I
about
see
it
that again? Oh, okay. Yeah, that looks to me like a play on, King George. George Washington was asked to be the king. People wanted him to declare himself king after the Revolutionary War, and he wouldn't, because that would have betrayed the principles that the revolutionaries were fighting for, and he forged the presidency.
That's interesting.
Instead. Yeah.
I took it as a kind of imperial. This is the role that they're in. They're in the let them eat cake role now.
I could have totally misread that picture. That might be actual King George, of
I couldn't
England.
tell you.
Okay.
I'm not the historian. I
Yeah.
should be. But Lomperis, it'd be really easy to dismiss an article like this, just saying it's sour grapes, man. Like they didn't get the vote their way on paragraph 2548.2, and now they're just saying the whole system is broken. Of course, this mirrors American politics, because it mirrors the populism of Trumpists. The Trumpists are known for saying the whole system is broken, it's corrupt, there's a swamp, we need to go in and drain the swamp. There's going to be another civil war, like all this rhetoric, and then to see much of it mirrored in our denomination is so off-putting. This article I drew our attention to, it was called "Liberal Bishops Have Redefined United Methodist Polity." Are you sympathetic to this notion that there has been an executive takeover within the United Methodist Church, or do you think that that's sour grapes?
Well, I think it's true in the sense of General Conference has been postponed, and General Conference has not been allowed to do its job. It's not only the bishops, though. It's a combination of the bishops and the committees set up by the conference, such as the Committee on General Conference, whose very job is to plan the next General Conference, instead functionally prevented the next General Conference from happening. And that short-circuits the intended governance of the church. So
Lomperis talks about this dynamic of not being able to get together and the vacuum that creates, and he says increasingly bishops are stepping into this vacuum to do what they want, disregarding their obligations under the discipline to uphold church laws legislated by the General Conference. So, and of course, that's not just the bishops who refuse to obey General Conference. We have a long history of the general boards also not doing what the General Conference has said. But here it talks about the hypocrisy of what the Judicial Council has done in saying it's okay for General Conference not to meet, but hey, we really need jurisdictional conferences to meet.
Yeah.
What's the difference there? There doesn't seem to be any so far as how they made that decision, except for what's good for the bishops. And then with this latest decision, and just the very fact that bishops can and are willing to put their own agenda in front of all the other cases waiting in line for Judicial Council ruling, and that the Judicial Council will attend upon those, put them at the front of the line, seems indicative that the whole system could have been co-opted by the bishops. And just the fact that so many decisions have been made that seem to go their way. I don't think that we can say definitively. I think Lomperis speaks with more confidence that he can, but it's definitely worth going through that article, I think, and considering.
Yeah. I'll need to read that thoroughly. I'm something of a contrarian when it comes to bishops, in that I like bishops. For obvious reasons, because of recent experience, many conservatives become soured on bishops, and so there's certainly there is certainly a voice, a faction that would say, well, in any new expression of Methodism, we need to not have bishops, because what good have the bishops ever done? However, I do believe that the episcopacy, having bishops, is a legitimate form of church government. Of course, we can have the conversations of, is there a difference biblically between episkopos and presbyteros, the overseer, and the elder. And the Methodists have always had this ambiguous idea that, well, there's theoretically, technically not a difference, but we're going to appoint a different office anyway.
Right.
You're an elder by ordination and then appointed to the office of bishop. But at any rate, I tend to have more traditional historical sympathies to the way that the Catholic Church does things and the Orthodox Church does things. I think bishops are good. However, personally, I think we should have more bishops with smaller places to oversee, smaller conferences. The big change we should make, I believe, to the way bishops are elected is to elect them locally. Elect them by the people who they're going to serve and lead, so that when you're voting for bishops, you're voting for someone you would want to work for. You're voting for someone you really want to lead you, rather than voting for political reasons, for reasons of political correctness, for filling quotas, et cetera, et cetera. You're voting for someone you want to follow.
Yeah.
I think we would get more quality bishops that way. And the way we do things is because of Methodist history, and everything goes back to the circuit riders, and everything goes back to the American frontier, and our history is certainly important, and we have traveling bishops because of that. But there is a time in history to change things for the good, for the present moment in history, and what is needed there. And I think more local bishops would be a much better way to go in the future.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see what happens. I know there's been a big push within a lot of the evangelicals joining with the GMC, just saying, let's get rid of the episcopacy. It's caused all these problems. Let's not replicate this drift towards executive power that we see in the government, that we see. And at least personally, I find myself sympathetic with your point. Just because something has been co-opted doesn't mean it always will, doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not as though local churches don't get co-opted. It's just about
absolutely, yeah.
If you're is any centralization of power always evil? And if you're a states' rights American, then the answer is yes.
Every form of church government can be corrupted.
Yeah.
Whether the bishop is in charge, whether it is a large church and the senior pastor is in charge, a small church with the senior pastor in charge, a small church with the board of deacons in charge, an unofficial patriarch or matriarch, like any kind of church governance can be co-opted by someone whose heart is not in the right place. And so you can't solve your problems simply by changing the way the organization is run.
Yeah, yeah.